Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Paul Alpert and I am the chair of the Needham Planning Board. This is a special meeting of the Needham Planning Board. It is Friday, February 25, so about 12:05 p.m. Luckily, we're able to do this remotely as we are all snowed in today, as I would imagine all of our attendees are too. This open meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with state regulations, and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not ensure that there will be public participation unless required by law. This meeting will not have public comment, except in connection with any hearing that is on the agenda. There are no hearings on the agenda. First, we will confirm that a quorum of the members of the planning board are present. When I call your name, please respond that you are present. Adam Block.
Present.
Marty Jacobs.
Present.
Jean McKnight.
Present.
And I'm the chair, Paul Alpert, so 4 of the 5 planning board members are present. Natasha Espada is not present. We really only have one matter on our agenda, which is discussing the decision for 1688 Central Avenue in Needham, the proposed daycare center, and Ms. Espada has recused herself from that discussion, and so she is not here. Next, I will introduce our planning department. We have our planning director, Lee Newman.
Present.
And our assistant planning director, Alexandra Klee.
Present.
Thank you. As each agenda item is reached, I will introduce participants who are here to present or discuss projects and proposals. Again, there are no agenda items of significance other than 1688 Central Avenue, which is a discussion of a decision that has been drafted. So there will not be any participants. But I will continue to read our remote meeting outline. So for those participating in the meeting, please also be aware that others may be able to see you and hear you. Anything that you share or state will be a matter of public record. All supporting materials for this meeting, including the agenda, are available on the town's website, www.needhamma.gov, unless otherwise noted. The ground rules for this meeting are designed to allow for an accurate public record. Each of the speakers on our agenda will be introduced. After speakers conclude their remarks, each board member will be asked by name for any comment, questions, or motions. All votes will be taken by roll call. For each participant, please remember to state your name for the record before speaking. For each person from the public who is recognized to speak, please remember to state your name and address for the record before speaking. That concludes the introductory remarks for remote Zoom meetings. The first item on the agenda is further discussion of the decision for the major project site plan. Needham Enterprises LLC is the applicant, the petitioner, for the property located at 1688 Central Avenue in Needham regarding proposal to construct a new child care facility that would house an existing child care business, the Needham Children's Center. I have recused myself as chair of this discussion, and so I turn the chair over to the vice chair, Adam Block.
Thank you, Paul. In our last meeting on February 11, we mentioned that we would enable written submissions from both the applicant, which we had received subsequent to our closing of the hearing, and also those from the neighbors through February 18 as the cutoff date for final comments. And I wish to thank Holly Clark, Joe Abruzzi's, and counsel for Greg Darish for their submissions, all of which are included in our record and will be revised, and will revise our decision with exhibits to acknowledge the receipt of all of these submissions since the closing of our hearing. We've had an opportunity to review all of these comments in addition to those from the applicant's attorney through their what was regarded as a settlement purposes only correspondence dated February 4. One issue that we discussed, I believe on February the 11th, was the question of whether we can include in our decision a restriction prohibiting a further subdividing of the lot. At first, I didn't think that subdividing was actually possible because there's no frontage for what would be a rear lot or multiple lots. But I've since learned that an easement from the daycare lot to a subsequent lot in the back that would otherwise create a private way would actually cure that problem and would otherwise enable a subdividing of the lot. I asked town council a question on this matter and I received a response from him. I'll read the substance of both of those communications for the record now. On February 23, I emailed town council asking, is there a legal basis for excluding a provision in our decision that prevents the applicant from subdividing the lot? And on February 24, I received a response from attorney Chris Heap saying, and permit me, this will take a moment to read through, and you may also hear some of the town public works trucks in the background just based on the location of where I am to the proximity of the road. So I hope that you can hear. The best answer is that they can't subdivide the lot further unless the new subdivision complies with A, the subdivision control law, and B, the zoning bylaw. So if they want to subdivide the lot in, say, 5 years, they need to do so in a manner that satisfies all applicable land use law. Stated differently, if the planning board imposes this condition and prevents all future subdivision, you are effectively saying that they cannot create a new subdivision that complies with the law. I don't believe the planning board has the legal right to prevent a future subdivision that is entitled to approval under subdivision control and zoning simply because it is reviewing a site plan now. You might say as an alternative that they can change, that any change to the lot requires an amendment of the site plan approval. That's different than saying you can never do it, period. The analysis I received above is a little tricky. The analysis I describe above is a little trickier in the cases of a Dover Amendment use because the daycare operator could theoretically try to create a new lot for the daycare that does not comply with zoning bylaw by claiming the benefit of a Dover exemption. That seems unlikely, and the town could always enforce its minimum lot size requirement with respect to any newly created lot. The owner could also theoretically carve off a non-buildable A&R lot, perhaps in the back, and sell it to an abutter as an additional yard space, leaving 1688 with an operating daycare sitting on a smaller but still zoning compliant lot. But even in these two scenarios, the owner would be doing something that they are allowed to do under subdivision control, the zoning bylaw, and or the Dover Amendment. The condition we are discussing forecloses the applicant's ability to do something that complies with the law. Again, I do not believe that it is within the planning board's authority when performing site plan review. For my part, which is to say Attorney Heap, I think it is better not to include this provision and trust that any future subdivision of this property, if it ever happened, would need to be reviewed on its own merits and would be approved or disapproved as the law allows. That's the substance of the issue. And I think with respect to the provision that we have in our decision relating to the subdivision, which effectively I think the board was proposing to remove, I think I would propose to add a provision that says that any change to the lot requires an amendment of the site plan approval. That's my only comment. And with that, I return the discussion now to the board. If the board has any other comments or changes to our decision.
Adam, let me just ask, do you want to go through the red line decision as we now have it, page by page, and just see, and we can fit that in when we come to that issue?
That probably makes sense. Does everyone concur with that approach?
It's fine.
Yes.
Okay. So then I turn our decision and our discussion, I guess, to, at this point, what is page 17 of our decision, Article 1.4, which says the proposed project provides the childcare facility will house an existing Needham childcare business, namely the NCC, with the addition in red, no written lease, memorandum of understanding, or any other type of written agreement between the petitioner and NCC has been provided to the board.
Adam, can I just stop you there and just point out that on page 16, there is a section describing the exhibits as legal memorandums submitted after the close of the public hearing. And it goes up to exhibit 196.
Yes.
Is it there after exhibit 196 that we're going to add the additional materials received after the close of the public hearing up through the 18th of February?
Correct. Lee, I think we'll ask you to include those received, I guess, after January 6th as exhibits 197 and forward until we've included all of the correspondence. Jean?
Mr. Chair, wouldn't it work better for to follow the format we already have for the decision and put the correspondence from abutters and neighbors, insert that after exhibit 179, and then move on to the miscellaneous, which is where we now have the back and forth from abutters attorney and town council and attorney Heap.
Gene, I have no problem with that, except that it may require a bunch of changes to the exhibit numbers that come after that. That's all.
Yeah, because I had actually created a classification of, which separated out everything that we got before the close of the public hearing from everything that we got after the public hearing.
Yeah,
So-
I would suggest that after exhibit 192, we change legal memoranda to reflect that it's legal memoranda and comments from abutters or neighbors.
Okay,
And then add what we've received since January 6th after exhibit 195, so that our last exhibit, which is now 196, is still the sketch plan. And then when we refer to that sketch plan, we'll just have to do a universal search and replace exhibit 196 with whatever the new number is, because I kind of like the idea that the sketch plan is the last item. And because we refer to that sketch plan periodically throughout the decision.
Mhm.
And so it's easy to reference if it's the last item. That's my
Marty?
suggestion.
Thank you, Paul. Marty, do you have?
That's fine. That's fine. 196, even with a new number, it was presented after the close of the public hearing, so it's consistent to be in that section. I have no problem with that.
Yep, I agree with that approach, sure.
Lee, are you clear?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right, so I'm sorry about that, Adam, but so that brings us back to 1.4, the sentence that was added at the end.
Correct. Any further discussion on 1.4? Seeing none, I'll move forward to the next, which is 1.8.
Actually, what? It's actually 1.6, I think. I think the sentence at the end of 1.6 was added.
At all
You-
times, the childcare business will maintain compliance with staffing standards or requirements.
Or,
Right,
determined
I
by
don't
the-
think that was in the prior version.
It's
I-
not shown as newly added in the version that we have as our most recent.
It's not, you're right,
it
but
was, it must have been in the one that we looked at the last meeting, because the red line, Marty, just has what I changed subsequent to the last meeting.
all right, I just wanted to point it out to people that in my prior version that I was looking at, it wasn't there, but I have no problem with it. It's fine.
Marty, I'm going to ask you to continue to call that, these type of similar things out, that in the event that there is, if I, for instance, run to 1.8 and there is something at, you saw from a previous edition that was redlined to you,
Right,
that we continue that.
I
practice.
agree. That's helpful, yes.
yeah, I won't be shy. Okay.
So that carries us, unless there's any further discussion on any of these other items, to 1.8. And the traffic, which included the traffic reports as additional exhibits.
1.8 is fine with me as amended.
I think it's very helpful to have those specified there in that paragraph, yes.
Agreed. So unless there's any further comment, the next revision we have is at 1.16.
I actually think, I actually see,
Marty, I think you must have I think you've got an intervening document. If I remember at the last meeting, you hadn't uploaded the last one for some reason, which I think is what's
probably right.
causing this problem.
okay, all right. Well, what I
But
was
that-
going to point out was 1.14 and with some minor changes, which I have no problem with anyway, so it's fine. Okay. So where were you at 1.16?
We are correct at 1.16.
All right, can I just point out a couple very small things in 1.15, third paragraph,
Yes,
where it says the analysis included. I don't think the word included was used in the prior draft. If it was, just correct me. But I have no problem with it. I'm sorry?
I think there's an interim draft that you don't have, or for some reason you're not looking at it, because the red line that I have here is really what I changed.
Yeah, I think I have clipped together the old and new here. No, I'm wrong. I only have the new. Okay.
All right, in any case, I have no problem with the word included. And then on the third sentence in that paragraph, it says with the proposed driveway plan showing a dedicated Q/, it says drop off, but it actually says drop of. There's an F
Oh,
missing,
that's a typo.
Oh.
you know?
good
And it
catch,
should be
Marty.
one word, right? As a descriptive
Drop off, yes,
drop off, one word, yeah.
right.
Is it a hyphen word?
No, I don't think it needs to be.
Fine.
I mean,
Okay,
we want to be consistent, but I don't think it needs to be hyphenated as a,
Too many lawyers on this board.
yeah, I know. Well, you're gonna lose
but I
one.
would,
We're
I
gonna
went to
lose
that
one soon.
grammar school. You have to remember that.
All right, so we're back to 1.16. The added sentence at the end.
The town's traffic consultant, John Diaz of GPI, has reviewed the individual traffic reports submitted and has advised the board that the traffic report submitted by the petitioner and has subsequently revised during the traffic peer review process demonstrate a project that will minimize traffic delays in the area and will provide adequate access and egress operational conditions at the site driveway.
Works for me.
Turning next to a new a renumbered 1.17 and the inclusion in the second line following study recommendations have been recommended by the town's traffic consultant, John Diaz of GPI, and have been incorporated into the plan. Hearing no objection or comment, then I guess I'll proceed, subject to Marty.
Yeah.
on to new number 1.21, which speaks to the board finds placement of a large institutional building closer to the street than other buildings in the neighborhood is out of character with the surrounding neighborhood and conflicts with the town's interests in preserving the relationship of, and this is what's added, in preserving the relationship of structures and open spaces to the natural landscape, existing buildings, and other community assets in the area, in compliance with other requirements of this bylaw.
And that's the wording, relationship of structures and open spaces to the natural landscape, et cetera. That's right from our bylaw.
Yes, that was the intent of that change.
Yep.
And then in the next paragraph, there is.
Adam, can I stop you? Can I stop you?
Please.
I just noticed, going back a paragraph to 1.20, I have just a couple of edits, typos, I believe. At the end of the first sentence, it cites section 7.4.6. And then it says the project before the board shows deficiencies in 2 review categories, namely, and then it says section 7.46A. That should be 7.4.
Yes.
Yeah.
Point
Yes.
6.
When we take our final vote, perhaps it should include instruction that the planning director would correct any obvious typographical errors.
That's a good idea.
I'll
In case we
entertain
miss
that
any.
motion.
But I certainly appreciate it when somebody finds one and tells me about it.
Because, you know,
So don't be shy. I want to hear about it.
lack of a decimal point in a 36-page decision is pretty easy to miss.
Yeah,
But there's
I
another
wasn't
one.
suggesting that we shouldn't keep on being careful here,
No,
Mark.
no, no. In the next or the last paragraph of 1.20, it
Correct.
starts with 7.46E.
Yep.
Again, it should be 7.4.6E.
Lee, we don't envy your task in drafting these decisions with these, with how significant the punctuation changes can be.
Do you see it, Lee?
I've got them both. Thank you very much for catching those.
Okay, great.
There is an addition, Marty, do you have anything else?
Not in that, nope.
In the second paragraph of 1.21, Lee's added in the middle of the second paragraph, see exhibit 176, relating to a comparison of 11 abutting residential properties along Central Avenue showing a 65-foot front yard setback for the residential property, for one residential property, with the remainder 10 properties presenting with front yard setbacks in the range of 103 to 117 feet. Seeing no hands for discussion, I move, there's some renumbering. And then I'll move to the next substantive change, which is there's a correction made on page 28 of our decision, just prior to the conditions at 21D.
Wait a minute. There is a minor thing at the top of page 25. Changing the word lighting to light.
That
Yes,
happened that happened earlier, I think. Yeah, oh, I see it. Yeah, you're right. Light trespassing.
Where is that, Lee? I'm sorry, I was
on
rereading.
page 25, Jean, at the top.
1.25.
Paragraph G.
The lighting on site shall not cause a public health nuisance with light trespassing onto, I think I had mentioned that, but instead of from lighting, it's changed to light. Do you see that, Jean?
Don't
Very
see it
top.
quite now, but I don't want to hold things up.
The first line of the first paragraph on the
Yeah, so
top of
it's-
page 25.
So it's paragraph G of section 1.23.
Right.
If you've got.
One point, I'm lost. I'm not seeing subparagraph. Oh, here it is. Oh, yes. Right. G. Oh,
G.
I'm up. All right, now I see it. The lighting on site shall not cause a public health nuisance with light trespassing onto abutting properties, and everybody's agreeable to that, and I am too. Thanks for guiding me. Yep.
And then on 1.24, you'll have to excuse me if I missed this on the prior, but subsection B was actually not in the prior version that I had seen.
Is that offer guidance on what mitigation are necessary in the event the
Yes.
soil is found to be contaminated?
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody knew that, at least to me, that was new.
Understood. Do you have any comment about including it?
No,
In fact, I think that was part of the memo from the Board of Health
it's fine.
as to what their requirements would be.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Oh, I'm sorry, you were at 1.28. Another thing that to me was new from a prior version is the very last sentence that starts, "To this end, the operator will regularly review its drop-off and pickup schedule." I have no problem with it, but I just wanted to call it out as, to me, being new.
And I'll add, and will enforce such schedule among its customers.
Right.
So now proceeding further, the next, there's a typographical change on page 28, paragraph 2.1D, approximately the middle paragraph, shall respect what was, I think, a 50-foot minimum setback, shall respect a 35-foot minimum setback distance along the southern property line.
Okay, so that's reflective of the facts that,
Correct.
okay.
And then in the conditions, there is some renumbering.
Anyway, can I stop you for a sec?
Yes,
Can we go back to 1.32 on page 27?
yes,
Says the board finds the plan as modified by this decision. I'm gonna propose a change. Really an addition of 2 words to make it consistent with what's going on in 1.33, the very next paragraph. So it reads as modified and conditioned by this decision, which is really done in 1.33 as well, where it says as modified, conditioned, and limited.
Well, yeah, I like that. Is that that's consistent with what we often do, Lee?
No, I don't remember how I normally word it, but yes, I think Marty's suggestion is a very good one.
Yeah, and of course, conditions are mentioned in the therefore, the paragraph that ends this here, but why not as modified and conditioned by this, right?
I think it's a good idea.
I'm fine with that. Hearing no further discussion, we'll continue.
Well,
Now-
Marty suggested adding the word "and conditioned" and cites a phrase in 1.33 that says conditioned and limited.
Yeah, we could do
Marty, should
that
we
too.
also add the words and limited?
Sure.
As
Yeah.
modified conditions and
And
limited by
limited.
this decision.
Yes.
Oh, we're looking at 1.32 with that?
Yes,
That's where it's going to be added. Yes.
Yeah, the board finds this plan as modified and
As modified, comma, conditioned and
comma, conditioned and limited.
limited by this decision.
Okay,
Any further comments on this provision? Hearing none, we'll again proceed now into the plan modifications. There is some, I mentioned 2.1D, and then I mentioned under conditions that there's renumbering and various citations. And I come to 3.8, which Marty has been removed. It did say all buildings and land constituting the property shall remain under a single ownership, and the property shall not be further subdivided. So this is a condition at paragraph 3.8 that was subsequently removed. And what I would like to propose here instead is that, as Attorney Heap mentioned. Any change to the lot shall require an amendment of the site plan approval. Yes, Jean.
I wonder if just it being specific, saying any change to the size or dimensions of the lot. Is that being limiting in some way?
I would prefer to keep it as,
That's what we're looking for.
as general as possible, that any change to the lot requires an amendment of the site plan approval.
My only comment about that,
Mhm.
instead of using the word lot, I would prefer to use the word property, since property is defined right at the beginning of this decision.
As opposed to lot, I'm fine with that. So Lee,
Let
3.8,
me look at the definition. Where is it?
Right at
Mark,
on page 1.
the property. Property. Oh, okay, yeah, it is defined.
Lot is not.
Yeah, that's true. And it says it contains a total of 3.352 acres. And it's shown on the assessor's plan. Yeah, that's good.
Lee, are you okay
Is
to
it-
now
Yeah.
include a paragraph 3.8, a provision that reads, any change to the property shall require an amendment of the site plan approval.
Okay,
If we're okay with that, can we go back to 3.2 for a second?
Sure. We're now at 3.2.
3.2, this is on page 28. It says the operation of the proposed childcare facility shall be described in, and then there's a list of sections. I'd like to go back and try to understand why 1.16 is in that list. I don't see that as really being a way that the childcare facility is going to be used.
116.
116 reads about the traffic impact assessment.
Wait a minute,
I understand what you're saying and I concur with that.
sections 1.16 and 1. Oh,
So question is, why is 1.16 listed in 3.2?
yeah, but 1.17 does have to do with the operation.
It's listed, and that's fine. I have no question about
Oh, it's
117. I'm
referenced
only
1.16.
questioning 1.16.
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, also if we're going to include everything that came in through the 18th, there was a further communication from the operator of the current Needham Children's Center describing the operation. Was it, I'm not sure if it was an attachment to something that came in from Attorney Huber or just sent separately.
yes, but are we gonna, well, I think it really depends on Gene as to whether or not we're gonna accept those changes or those operational.
Right.
I'm not sure. I don't know what's
redesign
embedded in
building
that
as
letter, and
much
I don't
as
know
we-
if they were items that we completely agreed
Yeah.
to change.
I'm
So I
just
think-
reading it to see if it says anything that really is pertinent to the operation. What I'm referring to is this two-page
Yeah.
document.
I don't remember. I mean,
Doesn't
I think she asked for a couple of things. I think she asked for the change for a change in terms of when the trash would be picked up. I think she asked, for some provisions to have some events at the property. So, I mean, I think we need to look at what the board finds acceptable before we indicate that it's a protocol we want to have her live by.
Well, I think if it's a submission, like all the other submissions that we received up through the 18th, it should be listed, whether or
Yes,
not we
but-
accept any of it.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
it's
should be listed, but
provision.
this is a
Yeah.
condition that says that the operation is going to be as described in something.
Oh, I
And so
see.
if there are provisions in there that if you agree with everything that in terms of the operational parameters and it's consistent with the conditions, yes, but if it's not, then no.
Yeah, and in reading this carefully, it does not ask for any changes, this 2-page memo.
Okay.
But it does not just describe the current operation in any relevant detail. So I take back my comment that we might refer to it.
So after that, if we all agree that 1.16 shouldn't be in that list
Yep.
in 3.2, let me just ask a question of everybody under 3.3. Hours of operation shall be 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. No childcare operation shall be allowed on Saturday or Sunday, presumably or holidays. What about holidays?
Fine.
Well, wait a minute.
I'm just asking. Go ahead.
Childcare facilities may have to be open on holidays if the parents have to work on the holidays. There are some holidays where parents don't have the day off and childcare facilities stay open in order that the parents have some place to put their children.
And then the other substantive issue that relates to this is the ability for administrative activities to happen on weekends, like training for their staff, or after hours, after 6.
Right, that was my next question. So the question, I guess, is, should we expand the narrative of 3.3 to list what we believe should be allowed on weekends or after hours? Or should we leave it alone? Which is another way of stating Adam's question, I think.
I think that it's reasonable to allow, and we should include this, that when we say childcare operations, we haven't really identified any of these terms, and yet it's one thing to, on the weekends, and she's not proposing this, to have kids in the childcare on the weekends. It's not what she's proposing. What she is proposing is the ability, I think, after 6 p.m. During the work week and on the weekends, to be able to provide training for her staff. I think that's valid. And I also think it's valid that it's possible that they may have meetings after 6 p.m. Like if, between an individual, between a child's parents or guardians, et cetera, and a teacher. I think that type of activity is fine, but what shall be the light out hour, so to speak?
Yes, if we make a distinction, as I think Adam was saying, we haven't defined what we mean by the operation of the childcare facility. And certainly we want to keep that to these hours. But the evening meetings with parents, the additional training of staff that might occur in the evenings, and even meetings with groups of parents on a weekend day, we could somehow make clear here that we don't mean that limitation on childcare operation to include these additional activities.
Agreed, provided, however, that any such additional activities, do not cause an overflow of parking on, the side streets or Central Avenue, which we have a provision for elsewhere in this decision, and yet it may be worth noting specifically here.
Mhm.
Then shall we have language that says the hours of operation for the childcare facility shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, except any meetings between parents and the operator.
No, I would suggest that we leave these two sentences alone and add something after these two sentences.
Like notwithstanding.
Notwithstanding, notwithstanding, comma.
So a new paragraph 33.4.
No.
No,
Just tack it on to 3.3.
Oh,
Tack
okay.
it on to the end of
Notwithstanding
3.3.
the foregoing.
I like that idea, yeah.
Yeah. Keep flowing on 3.3. Notwithstanding the above. The child care facility may be used on weekdays until 8 p.m. and on Saturdays and Sundays for administrative purposes, meetings with staff, and small meetings with parents and guardians.
limited, you want to put a limitation of X people or X cars?
I would add, provided that all other conditions of this decision, including but not limited to parking requirements, are not
preserved.
violated. Because we have a provision that says there won't be any street parking.
Right.
Correct. I'm fine with that.
You got that language, Lee?
I'll pull it off the tape. Yes, I
Okay.
have it.
Good.
Let me mention something else at this point. It doesn't really belong here, but don't want to forget it. There was also, there's a set limitation, or the parking was based on an expectation that there'd be a certain number of staff people. And I think someplace in the decision, we have that limitation on the number of staff.
We do.
But
I believe
it was
it's
said
18.
that there would be occasions when therapists evaluating a child or providing some particular care for a child might be an additional staff person for short periods of time on an occasional basis, something like that. But that seems reasonable. And it was pointed out that they, at least, they do have one extra parking space. I'm not sure where we would put that, but
Well,
does seem reasonable.
my first question is, would those people really be added to staff, or would they be independent contractors?
Oh, I expect there would be independent contractors.
Well, then our
Not
language
staff.
limiting the number of staff to 18 doesn't affect that. The fact that you have an
Okay.
independent contractor coming in and using a parking space isn't
Mhm.
violating this decision.
Yeah,
I
okay,
don't think we need to deal with it, Gene. I don't
okay.
think we say anything about it.
I concur. So we're resolved then on 3.3. And again, I move back to 3.8 with respect to the subdividing. And I don't think I heard a complaint. I think we resolved that 3.8 shall now read
3.8.
3.8. Thank you. Any change to the lot shall.
No.
Property.
Property,
Property.
Thank you. Any change to the property shall require an amendment of the site plan approval.
Well, didn't Gene suggest any change to the property's size or shape?
I prefer to
Yeah,
keep. it
I
general.
said area or dimensions,
Right.
to the property area or dimensions.
I'd like to leave it open, any change to the property.
Okay,
That's pretty
'Cause
broad.
it might not, it might be something that's other than dimensions, other than,
I mean, like
Yeah.
elevation?
what, yeah, it's, let's not limit it in a way that we'll come to regret if we miss something.
How
If
about
something should be in
any-
that list that we're not thinking of today.
How about any change to or on the property? How about that? Because that takes in the buildings as well.
I would prefer to keep it as property.
I mean, I was thinking of, what people said about the possibility of bringing in a subdivision road along the driveway. Well, of course, that changes the area of the lot, and that's what we're concerned about.
Yeah, but that would be under the
Perhaps the
subdivision control law
setbacks.
anyway, Lee. That comes in front of us under the subdivision control law.
Oh, I know.
So,
I know, and if the building still had appropriate setbacks, I suppose would have to approve the subdivision control law, even if it made the lot smaller.
that's
for
right,
the
that's
building.
right. And all we're saying here
But
is they have to come to us with an amendment to this decision so that we make that change as part of this decision.
Right, right.
We can't,
So
we
I would-
can't use that to deny a subdivision that they're otherwise legally entitled to.
Oh, I understand. All I was trying to say is to focus on what the concern is. And it's not, I didn't understand that we were dealing with a change to the building in this paragraph.
Well, you
I
know,
think we deal with that other places. I'm gonna withdraw my comment.
are you? Because I kind of liked it.
Yeah,
Because, there was one thing in Mr. Huber's letter was the approval of an accessory building of 2,000 square feet and 15 feet high. And my initial reaction was, if you meet the definition of an accessory building under our bylaw, you're entitled to have an accessory building under our bylaw. So it's an as of right. It's an as of right issue.
Just for clarity on that point, Paul, when our bylaw says that you can't have more than one non-residential building on a lot, that's not in conflict with an accessory structure or use.
That's how I interpret it.
I do too.
But, is a 2,000 square foot building 15 feet high? Is that an accessory use that's allowed by our bylaw?
And
I
is that
think-
customarily?
Yeah, so I think even just having the requirement that any change to or on the property would require an amendment of this decision would at least put it in front of us. That if they want to add an accessory building, they come to us and say, okay, we're amending the bylaw to provide for this accessory building. And then we can look at what they're putting on there to say, yes, you've got a 300 square foot building that meets our definition of an accessory building because our definition is such as a garage, and a garage is more than 300 square feet. So yeah, that's fine. But a 2,000 square foot building, is that under our definition of an accessory building under our bylaw?
Just,
It at least gets it in front of us.
just to be clear, you said would amend the bylaw. I think you mean would amend the decision.
yeah.
Correct.
And secondly, would an amendment to the site plan require public hearing and notice?
An amendment does, a minor modification does not.
So
Oh,
just so
wait.
everybody is focused, there are two kind of conditions that are working in tandem here. One is condition 3.6, which deals with the building, the parking areas, the driveways, and what you're approving. And that condition basically says that any change to the plan, which is the drawing in front of you, which shows the landscaping, which as amended, which shows the buildings, any change to that plan requires an amendment.
That's why I'm happy to withdraw my comment.
So
Okay.
I think Marty's issue is embedded in it.
Okay, I'll buy that.
So we are,
Covered by 3.6. So we don't have to add language here.
Please read what we are now going to have as the language of 3.8.
3.8 shall now read, any change to the property requires an amendment of the site plan approval.
Shall require an amendment.
Shall require.
shall require an amendment of the site plan approval. Okay, thank you.
I guess which. Let's go back to 3.6 then.
Mm.
Should we replace the word site with property in 3.6?
Well, site features and off-site features.
I'm just talking about the word site.
Yeah, I know, but I'm reading it to say and other property and off-site features.
I think it's meant to contrast with site and off-site.
Yeah,
No.
that's what I intended, on the property, off the property.
Well,
Yeah,
use that.
I
How
don't
about
think,
using that?
I don't think it's inconsistent, Marty.
You're okay with using the word site?
I'm okay with using the word site in 3.6 and using the word property in 3.8. Because our idea to 3.8 originally was to deal with subdivision. That was why we had it in there.
Right.
And so we're really dealing with the property when we're talking about subdivision. So.
Hearing no further discussion.
I could probably live with it. Okay, all right. I'll let it go.
Hearing no further discussion, we then move forward to what I have. There's some additional changes to some citations throughout, but the next substantive comment or change is I think we're done. Actually.
Well,
Okay, so there were other issues that were raised by
So,
Huber's letter and by Pat Day's requests
yes,
that have not been reflected here that I think we need to discuss.
I agree.
so let's turn to Mr. Huber's letter of the 4th then.
Yep.
And while, just for those that are watching, some of the public comments that we've received have, said that we're responding to threats of, litigation and, neglecting our responsibility as elected officials and so forth. And I just want to be clear that, as a planning board, we probably are best to presume that any decision we make may be appealed. So none of our activity and discussion relate to a threat. And I would also note that there's been a hypocrisy where some of the abutters have said that they may appeal the decision too. So although part of this process has not gone as the way we would otherwise expect, we do have, we have to deal with the material that we have in front of us, and that's what we're doing, whether we like it or not. Okay, so now
Adam, before you proceed, can I pick up on something? You kind of skipped over the last few pages pretty quickly, and I was trying to catch up with my comments here. On page 30 at the bottom, 3.17, which spills over to page 31 at the top, it says the petitioner shall be responsible for implementing and complying with the requirements of the Board of Health as detailed in section 1.23 and section 1.24 of this decision. And in those paragraphs, it lays out what the Board of Health wants to see happen with the licensed site professional and et cetera. What those paragraphs don't say, as far as I can tell, and maybe you're going to tell me I'm wrong. The question is, does 1.24 in particular require that the LSP recommended work actually be done?
Well-
I think we need to go back and read 1.24, because I don't see where it says that, after the LSB does his work and makes his recommendations, that whatever they recommend has to be done. I don't see where we say that. And maybe Lee or somebody can call me on that and say I'm missing something.
So I actually think I participated in revising some of the language in what's now 1.24. And as I understood it, the licensed site professional will determine, will conduct an environmental evaluation of the property. And through that, they'll determine whether, and if so, what type of barrier capping measures may be necessary. And then they'll offer the guidance on what mitigation are necessary in the event that the soil is found to be contaminated. And other items, but if
It
they,
doesn't drop the other shoe. It doesn't drop the other shoe as to what is done with those recommendations.
Right. And
Those
the
are
guy,
recommendations.
Right.
So there's
Right.
no requirement that the work actually be done. I think there's an assumption that the Board of
Right.
Health will make a determination as to what work needs to be done. I do not have in front of me, I didn't think to print it, the memo that we got from the Board of Health. So I don't know whether the memo from the Board of Health then drops the other shoe as to what the Board of Health will do with the report from the licensed site professional.
Lee, are you able to easily call that up?
And-
I'll
And
have to find it.
And might
Go
we,
grab it.
we don't say anywhere explicitly, which we often do when we have a condition, that this condition has to be satisfied prior to the issuance of a building permit. Is that implied or?
Well, if the building permit, I think as an order of process, they apply for building permit, which would include any site work. And part of that site work would include soil testing and so on that they would spell out. They may do it in 2 applications or 1. But
Let's wait for Lee to get back because she may know what the process is. That may be
Mm.
part of the demolition permit. Because isn't an application for a demolition permit referred to the Board of Health?
I think that it is, but that's a separate activity than soil testing. So I think the building I think it's
Yeah, but the
possible.
Board of, but the Board of Health then would have the opportunity to say you can't demolish it until the soil testing is completed.
Well, they may actually do the soil test after the building's gone. Because you can then test in a more area. I don't want to,
Well, there's both soil testing and then there's also like asbestos and other things that might be in a building.
asbestos has been done.
Okay,
That was
so
done
Marty,
prior.
where were you in the conditions in 3 about this?
I was in 3.17.
So 3.17,
And my point, and the way you phrased it, Paul, was good. I liked it when you said, well, does 3.17 specifically say that the other shoe has to drop? I understand that the petitioner has to implement and comply with the requirements of 1.24, which is the licensed site professional has to be hired and go out there and make his recommendations. I get that. But the other shoe is
Doing the work.
he's got to do the work that's recommended. And there may not be any work that's recommended. I don't know.
Right.
Whatever it is, it's got to be done.
well,
And
then
that's
why,
what you don't say.
No,
Maybe
the other
we
shoe, the other shoe doesn't drop in the memo. I mean, the memo just basically
Okay.
No.
So maybe in 3.17, which is the important part, because these are the conditions.
Right.
Article 1 is just our findings of fact legally. These are what we're requiring. So we say the petitioner shall be responsible for implementing and complying with the requirements of the Board of Health as detailed in section 1.23 and section 1.24 of this decision, and all requirements of the Board of Health that result from the Board of Health's review of the testing set forth in section 1.24.
Implementing and complying, yeah. And all
Somebody's gonna have to repeat that back to me. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to remember it. Okay. The petitioner shall be responsible for implementing and complying with the requirements of the Board of Health as detailed in section 1.23 and section 1.24 of this decision.
And speak
Comma.
slowly.
Okay, well, because I'm at the end, I'm now,
Okay,
so now I have comma instead of period. And all other requirements of the Board of Health, as the Board of Health shall determine from the report of the licensed site professional as set forth in section 1.24.
could we say based on the report? Or
Yes. Let me go back to 1.23 and make sure that there's nothing in there that I need to.
Mhm.
Yeah, 1.23 really has nothing there that would be relevant to this.
That sounds good.
I think that'll work.
I
Yeah,
like it.
I'm just looking outside. I think I'm being plowed. Thank goodness. I think that works, Paul.
thank you. After 47 years of practicing law, I finally can think on my feet.
I can warn you, eventually you will lose that skill.
Oh, gee.
That doesn't mean that non-lawyers don't have it, though.
That's true. That's true.
All right. So shall we now turn to Evan's letter from February 4?
Let me just see if there's anything else. Hold on one second.
Please.
Oh, can I?
Yeah.
Well, maybe this was going to come in under that discussion anyway, but can we turn to 3.30?
3.30, all deliveries and trash dumpster pickup shall occur only between the hours of 9:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and not at all on Sundays and holidays. The dumpster shall be screened with a wooden fence, which shall be maintained in good condition. The dumpster shall be emptied, cleaned, and maintained to meet Board of Health standards. Go ahead.
I would like to discuss one aspect of this, which is limitation on trash dumpster pickup, 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. That part's fine with me. And then it says Monday through Saturday. We did receive some comments from one abutter in particular who strongly objects to Saturday trash pickup. And I'd like to discuss this. What do people think?
I think it's an anything that we come up with is going to be imperfect, because either we're going to have it more traffic going during peak or off-peak hours during the day, during the work week, which people aren't going to be happy with, or it's on a weekend. And if it's in a reasonable hour on a weekend, that's the, that might be the best, but there's no perfect solution. Go ahead, Jean.
Nope.
One concern I have is that Sunday is specially called out, essentially as if it's the only day of rest. And Saturday is a day of rest for other faiths other than Christianity. And also, this could be right next door to a temple, which is likely to be having services on Saturday, which could be greatly disturbed by the crashing sound of the pickup of trash. And I think we should be sensitive to that.
No, but let me add something. In material that Pat Day sent us after the hearing was closed, she says that traditionally her current operation only gets trash pickup once or twice a week.
Right.
So why does it have to be on Saturday?
I don't know.
I'm not suggesting I agree with her on this, but she says, oh, it's a danger to the children to have the trash pickup truck coming in while the daycare operation is going on Monday to Friday.
She does say that.
Yeah. Or, yeah, I recall her suggesting that. Or she was arguing, actually, in making that argument, she was arguing for an earlier trash pickup time, like 7 a.m.
Correct.
That's what she was doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I object to the earlier pickup time because of the nature of the neighborhood.
Oh, I do too.
This is totally a residential neighborhood.
Mhm.
And I think a 7 a.m. or even an 8 a.m. pickup time is very disturbing for this residential neighborhood. She mentions that she has the earlier pickup time in her current location, but that's at a church on the corner of Warren and Great Plain Avenue, and the next door neighbor is another church, and then it abuts commercial property.
Right.
And it's not as intrusive on the residential neighbors.
The intrusion that I see is if it were to happen between 7:30 and 9:30, is that it just exacerbates or could exacerbate two things: the traffic,
Yes.
and then also the on-site movement of vehicles. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So I do concur that I would preserve this. Jean,
Jean makes a good point. And as the only Christian among the four of us, I thank Jean for raising it. Temple Aliyah is a conservative congregation. Their Saturday morning services, I believe, would start, I haven't been to that temple in years, but usually a conservative congregation, the Saturday morning service is the major service, and it usually starts, I believe, at 9 a.m.
9:30, and then they get
Yeah.
busy usually by 10.
And it goes on until noon or later. Well, later if there's a bar or bat mitzvah.
But even still, I mean, the property's next door and they're inside. And
yeah, but it's noisy. The trash pickup is noisy. People are praying.
I understand. I just don't know how much of that's actually penetrated inside.
I don't know. And I don't know how well sound insulated Temple Aliyah is. It might be very well sound insulated.
I just don't see the need for it. I mean, if she was having daily trash pickup, I suppose there might be an argument, but I don't. She's talking about once or twice a week. What's the reason that she needs Saturday? I don't get it. I don't think she needs Saturday. I would make Saturday Friday and say not at all on weekends or holidays. That's what I would say.
I would accept that. I would accept that.
Yeah, we're responding to a neighbor. The temple hasn't itself raised this issue.
That's true.
But it does seem to me that it is an issue, so. Okay,
Yep. And then I moved to 3.31. I have a question. It says between the hours of 8 and 9, the petitioner shall shut off the driveway and parking lot lights. etc.
excuse me, could we go back? You said weekends. Would it be just more precise to say not at all on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays?
Fine, that's fine.
Okay,
And then on 3.31, this is the third sentence. It says between the hours of 8 and 9 PM. Why not by 8 PM? Why between 8 and 9?
Well, if they have a meeting with staff that runs until 8 o'clock and they're still cleaning up until 8:30.
you're talking about an activity, you mean this should be done before 8 PM? Essentially, what this is saying is it has to be off by 9 PM.
Correct.
With the same argument that you just
Yeah, actually, you're right, Larry, because Marty, because it seems as though we're saying they can't turn it off at 7 because it has to be turned off, shut off between
Correct.
8 and 9, as if we're concerned about safety of the people coming in and out. If you want it off by 9, just say 9
I agree with that. Marty, what do you think?
or 8, whatever it
I
is.
would say 8 myself.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if they need,
Well,
he needs to do after hours meetings or something, she's got 2 hours between 6 and 8. That's a lot.
Yeah, but if they're leaving the building at 8, don't you want them to have the parking lot lights on?
Make it 8:15. Why do you have to go to 9?
What's the time we set as far as, do we set a particular time on evening meetings? I thought we did.
Yeah, until 8 o'clock was what I.
Until 8
proposed.
o'clock.
So
Well,
then,
why don't we just compromise with 8:30?
Fine, I'll go with 8:30.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just going to be a setting on an automatic off switch, right?
that's right.
so,
So it should say by 8:30, the petitioner shall.
by
Yes.
8:30 PM.
Yep.
Presuming that we're all
Would it
here,
be- Would it be shall have, shut off by 8:30 PM, the petitioner shall
Shut off the driveway and parking lot lights, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, yeah, all right.
before we now proceed, unless anyone else has any other
Marty,
comment.
Marty was going through his,
Well, let me just see if I have anything else here.
you're all set, Marty? Okay.
Couple more things.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
It'll save us time later, though. Page 35. Section 4.1. Couple of things. Again, it says this decision applies only to the site and offsite improvements. Are you folks okay with the use of site, or do you want to use property?
I would say,
Well,
what,
I
Where
think
are we?
site and offsite makes sense.
Gene, we're on page 35, provision 4.1. First sentence.
There we are, okay. Yeah, we have talked about this before, didn't we? Maybe not this section.
I would say this decision applies only to the property, the site, and offsite improvements, et cetera, et cetera.
That's fine. After the word improvements, but though there's a second issue, there's a comma there, which I don't think belongs there.
Take it out
Where is that?
After the word improvements,
on the first line.
Okay,
and then on 4.2, in the first line, it also uses the word site. And I think it should use the word property.
There shall be no further development of this property and site.
Well, that's redundant, isn't it?
I don't think you need both there.
Okay,
no, you don't. I'll change it to property.
Okay. And then one last comment. This is a small edit. Page 36, paragraph 4.7. I missed this the first 3 times I read it, but the last sentence says, the board, however, shall not grant an extension as herein provided unless it finds that the use of the property in question or the construction of the site has not begun except for good cause.
Yeah, Marty, I've looked at that sentence in every other decision that we have approved since I've been on the board in the past 6.5 years, and I'm still trying to figure out what it's saying.
Well, I think we got to make one of 2 changes to that. I think after the word begun, we could add a comma, or we could delete the word except.
Yeah. Delete the word accept, you're right.
The board shall
Except
not
shouldn't
grant
be
an
there.
Unless it
extension
finds.
unless it finds
Has
that the
not
use of
begun
construction has not begun.
for good cause.
Right. The word accept is very confusing there.
Yeah.
Unless it finds
Lee, can you make use of that
property has
for
not
our
begun
decisions going forward?
for good cause.
I hope, hopefully I'll remember when I pull one up and I'm editing it. Alex, you hear this, right?
I think if you put a comma in after begun, it's probably okay, but I think the better way is just take out the word accept.
Okay, we'll take it out here, and if we mess up again, somebody call it up, but we'll try to remember.
We'll call it the Marty exception.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I have.
So shall we take, we've been at this for over an hour. Shall we take a 10-minute break to have a sandwich and do other things and reconvene?
I've already had my sandwich. I've got other work that I need to do. If we can plow through, I think we're almost done.
Okay, then can we take a 5-minute?
If I get
bathroom?
hungry, I'll eat my gorp that I have here.
Yeah, Adam needs to eat something.
Well,
Maybe, sure, of
I'll-
course.
I'll forgo that, but can we just get at least a 5-minute bathroom break?
Sure.
Let's do
You're
it.
the chair. You can decree it.
So decreed. Gavel.
Okay.
All right. So now, unless there's any further changes, I think there was some desire to discuss Evan's letter.
The further issues raised by that, yeah.
And we're going back to the letter of February
February 4.
4th. Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, to a large degree, we've already discussed much of what's in here.
Correct, although there may be some logistical things that if the 135 setback, do we have to change the provision in 2.1D? No, I guess not, because that, you calculated, I think, Lee, that 280 feet for parking.
I came up with that number.
Okay, I'll give you the credit, Paul.
Yeah, I came up with the number by taking a 135-foot setback,
And
adding the length that dimensions of the building as shown on the plan. And then adding a 5-foot walkway between the
Right.
back of the building and the parking lot, and then rounding up to 280, rounding up to the nearest 5 feet.
Yeah, but if you adjust the 135 number, then the 280 number. will have
Correct.
to be
If we
changed.
adjust the 135 number, then the 280 number gets adjusted proportionally.
So then let's discuss 135.
Well, the compromise, we're focusing on the compromise, the idea of increasing the setback to 80 feet. That would retain the current, the paragraph, the last paragraph of the letters regarding section I guess 2.1D. I'm referring to the paragraph that says as a compromise on page 2.
Correct.
We agreed to increase the setback to 80 feet. And it seemed, whether in this paragraph or elsewhere in this letter, it was said that the applicant would agree to remove the barn. Now, presumably they have an eventual idea of using this area where the barn is for the accessory building that we discussed earlier, which, and I don't see any problem with that necessarily. As I've stated earlier, in both when we were still in hearing phase and in our discussions, I don't see the necessity for the setback of 135 feet. And I would be pleased to see this compromise be agreed to by the other members of the board.
Right.
My feeling on this is the longer the setback, the better. I think it's fair to say that 135 is a fairly arbitrary establishment, as would 80. I will say that based on some of the correspondence that we've received and read and the conversations we've had, that I don't recall that the civil engineer said that there is ledge. And if so, how much there is, nor have I, and I think that in the context of another assessment of the property that that the engineer had said that there isn't ledge, if I remember correctly.
May I make a comment here?
Yeah, please.
I think we should defer this and discuss the other issues first, because this letter states that supposed compromise of 80 feet, and I thought 135 feet was a compromise.
Correct.
That compromise of 80 feet was contingent upon our accepting all of their other issues raised in the letter, which I'm not prepared to do, but we're going to
I'm not
discuss
either.
that. We're going to discuss the other conditions. And so if we're not going to approve the other conditions that are in the letter, I say we stick with the 135, maybe reduce it a little bit, but it's, if they're not going to accept the other conditions and we're in front of a judge, I'd like to be in front of the judge at 135 feet. Because they raise the issues about the
Mhm.
post-construction traffic mitigation. They raise the issues about a septic system versus the sewer system. Other issues we may have already discussed, those are the two that I'm remembering. Police detail is part of the traffic mitigation. We haven't discussed the issues raised in this letter about traffic mitigation. And if we're not going to change our position on the traffic mitigation in light of this letter, why should we move the distance from 135 feet when we already have issues that are going to be appealed?
I understand. So let's move on to other issues. And we can come back to that later if necessary.
Can I make a suggestion, a further suggestion on that?
Yes,
Comments that Attorney Huber puts in this letter really relate to the need to redraft some of our language because it's, in his view, improperly or unreasonably vague. So let's skip over that for the moment and go to the end of his letter, where he talks about, in addition, the decision would need to be modified to include the following, and he names 3 things.
Mhm.
So let's find out first whether the 4 of us agree that we would include the following 3 things. Would we agree that the applicant shall have the option of installing an on-site septic system?
All right, here's my, if I may, Adam,
Go ahead.
thank you. Here is my thought on the on-site septic system. That's not our decision, that's a decision of the Board of Health as to whether this be sewer or septic. All that we're doing is approving a plan that shows a sewer system. And if there's going to be a septic system, it means modifying the plan for information that we don't have yet in front of us.
And would
I
require,
personally am in favor of going to septic rather than sewer because from what I'm reading, private septic properly maintained, a properly maintained septic system is better for the environment than being part of municipal sewer. So if the Board of Health approves a septic system, which may require regrading, which may require approval of the engineering department, they come back to us with an application to amend the plan to put in the septic system pursuant to the plans approved by the Board of Health and the engineering department. And we amend the plan. But I don't think that's a planning board decision. I think that's a Board of Health decision as to whether it should be sewer or septic.
Paul, if we,
I'm sorry, I generally agree with you, but it would, even as you describe it, it would require the planning board to amend its decision.
That's right. But I'm perfectly happy to amend the decision to allow for septic once they have a plan that's been approved by the Board of Health.
So that's for another day.
That's right. That's for another day.
So
Now, you know,
does that mean you would put some language in here to say the applicant can have the option if they come back before us and obtain an amendment and the approval of the Board of Health?
and then-
That's the
I'm
kind of-
willing to insert that. I don't think it's necessary, but I'm willing to insert a provision, a condition that says that if the Board of Health approves a septic system, if the Board of Health and if necessary, the engineering department approves a plan for the installation of a private septic system, the applicant will have the option of requesting an amendment to this decision to approve the plan approved by the Board of Health and the engineering department.
Which would require further public hearing and an amendment, and therefore subject to neighbors' comments.
Well, it's possible we would consider it a minor modification if it doesn't involve any change in the location of the building or the parking, and the grade changes are not major. It's possible we would consider it a minor modification too. We'd wait and see. But to implement that, I believe presently we require the sewer. And we have provisions regarding, if there is to be a sewer, of course, we need these provisions about compliance with requirements. I know there was a concern about whether the entire road needs to be repaved, and we left it that it was really up to our engineering department and Department of Public Works. But, you know, we need those provisions still.
And
because it
that's
might-
all based on the plan that's in front of us, which provides for hookup to the sewer.
Well, of course, yes. But, you know, I'm going along with the idea that we give them the option. And in that, if they have the option, the language you talked about, Paul, for compliance with the Board of Health and the engineering if necessary, and come back and review the plan, we do need, if they take the option of putting in the sewer, well, we have the protective language for that. But I think we say they must put in a sewer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but here's my
Because that's
question.
what the plan shows.
But here's my question.
Well, I
Are you
just want to be
both
careful
saying,
about wording, that's all.
but do we need wording for number one at all? Do we have to modify the decision to say anything about them having an option of installing an on-site septic system and coming back to us for amendment? They have that right. Why do we need language? That's my question.
I agree with Marty. I don't think we need language. If we decide that we want to give them some language, throw them, we can give them something, but it's basically a question, as I said, in my opinion, that's a question for the Board of Health. I don't know what the Board of Health's rules are about requiring this kind of new construction to hook up to municipal sewer rather than septic. They may require it anyway. I don't know.
Gene, do you think there should be language? Or, I mean, don't they already have this option that we're talking about anyway? What do you think?
Well, that's what I'm looking at our conditions to see what we say.
Well, we say that they're going to hook up to the sewer system as shown on the plan,
Right.
Mhm.
because that's what's on the plan.
Right, and if they want to modify that, the process is they would come to us and with an amendment to the site plan, and that's when we would tell them it would be subject to Board of Health approval and town engineering approval.
The other way around, Adam. They have to go to the Board of Health first. They have to have plans for the septic system. You don't just put in a septic system. You hire an engineer.
I understand.
Okay, who draws plans, and there might be regrading, and they have to present those plans to the Board of Health, possibly the engineering department. They approve it, then they come to us and say, okay, we've got the Board of Health approval. We need to amend our site plan decision in order to incorporate this septic system that has been approved by the Board of Health and the engineering department. Then as far as I'm concerned, it's a rubber stamp, but I want to do it by open hearing so that the neighbors can have their say. Because as I said, I would throw in the condition that the septic system has to be pumped at least once a year. But that's because, as I said, a properly maintained septic system is better for the environment,
So-
according to current scientific thinking.
I don't know what size tank they would have. I don't know if they would be required to pump more or less than. I'm not qualified to determine that.
Yeah,
If we don't need the
that's all up to the
language,
board. That's a Board of Health decision.
I was looking for any provision that has to do particularly with sewer. We have section 3.20. The petitioner shall secure from the Needham Department of Public Works a sewer connection permit with impact fee paid if applicable. Then we have section 3.24, and these are both on page 31. The petitioner shall connect the sanitary sewer line only to known sources.
Yeah, I think they have to bring the sewer in. I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah,
They have to bring it in from Countryway.
which I
yeah.
suspect
Sources of
is suddenly
disposal, I guess, is what sources means. Only all known sources, all known.
which may be
source.
more expensive that they realized after the fact, given all the other expenses here.
And the cost of materials is going up every day, so.
Okay, only to known sources. I'm afraid I'm having a hard time understanding section 3.24. maybe it's a standard language that engineers understand. All right, I think that's all I see with regard to the sewer. And obtain a street opening permit, 3.21. Shall be repaved gutter to gutter in the area impacted by the sewer installation after it's, so you're saying we just keep all those?
Yeah, because that's what's on the plan.
Because maybe they will put in a sewer, and that's what the plan shows. Shall connect in the, about connecting the sanitary sewer line. Okay, I just,
We have to write a decision based on the documents that are in front of us.
yeah, okay.
And that's not in front of us. So
So,
on that basis alone, I'm fine with them going to, to a septic, but it doesn't seem like there is a need in this decision to address it. And
I'm in agreement with that statement.
so now the next point that they raise is a 2,000 square foot storage structure in place of the barn. And I think, Paul, you were saying earlier that we're fine with them having an accessory structure that's customarily used, which would be some storage facility, but at a smaller size.
Well, I don't know if it's smaller size or not, but it's something that needs to be discussed at open hearing. If it's going to be 2,000, I think 2,000 square feet is pushing the envelope. 2,000 square feet and 15 feet high. And, we don't know, we don't know where this 2,000 square foot, 15 foot high structure is going to be in relation to lot lines with other properties. So, if they come to us with as our bylaw states, an accessory use such as a garage, so they come to us with something that looks like, smells like, tastes like what a garage would look like, that kind of a size, that's what they're allowed to have. But if they're going to put in a 2,000 square foot building that's, 5 feet from the lot line, right near Matt Heideman's house.
Agreed. So shall we be silent, or shall we say up to a certain size?
I think we be silent and let them come to us with an amendment to the plan to say, we want to have this accessory building, which is this size, and here's the design, and here's the plan. Another question is, does that have to go to the design review board? And this is where it's going to be located, and we want your approval.
Marty, what do you think?
Well, I completely agree with Paul. The only thing I would add is my memory of this whole story is we haven't asked them to change the basic structure at all. This basic structure, we're asking them to push it back so far, but we haven't changed the size or shape or function of this building that they proposed. So, in the way it was proposed, there was to be no storage outside this building, none, not even the barn. Specifically, the barn was excluded. So if it was designed so as to include everything they needed, according to everybody, state of the art, it's designed to have whatever storage they needed. So I'm not really understanding why, in this case, they would have any need for additional buildings for storage. But I have no problem if they want to ask and seek to amend. But I don't see why we would have any reason to address that in the decision as written. That's what I've.
Jean, what about you?
Well, I had been thinking that we could okay a provision right now and put it in the decision that an accessory building for storage purposes, not to exceed a certain number of square feet, may be constructed in the location where the barn is now located. And we know where that is. We
No,
know
that's-
what about.
Jane, that's the parking lot. They
Oh,
removed
well,
the
I was
barn.
assuming we're talking about this in the context of going along with compromise on the pushing the
80 feet.
front.
The setback.
I was assuming that, but
It seems to me that there are a lot of unknowns about what they need and don't need for a storage. And they can come back to us and seek to amend our decision. And by then they'll make greater clarity on what they would need and where they would cite it. And there is a method in which our process in which that would happen, and I'm fine to not include it.
okay, let's move on then.
So the last provision that really relates to the hours of operation, the number of staff, trash removal, which we've already discussed.
Mhm.
Except number of staff, which I'm not willing to change because that's what was represented to us. That's what's in the paperwork in front of us.
I agree.
And our understanding,
Although,
the word staff does not include
Independent
persons.
contract,
persons, contractors coming in.
correct.
and we did allow, I think Lee may have added in a previous version, some language about, as may be adjusted by whatever the state authority is. In other words, if there are current minimums, and those minimums and the state governing this type of work increases the number of staff required, as long as they're complying with those state statutes, that's fine.
And I think we have sufficient language already in our draft that would
Correct.
make it fine. Yeah. So if we don't seem to be inclined to modify our draft decision to include any of the 1, 2, or 3, is that the end of our discussion about this proposed settlement letter?
There are some other elements here that I would reconsider.
I'm looking at page 2 of the letter,
Mhm.
discussing 3.19, the operation of the childcare facility may not be transferred or assigned to another operator without prior written approval of the board and its sole and exclusive discretion after notice and hearing as the board may require. And we've had this discussion, I believe, with the original plan for the Carter building, about whether this board really has the authority to deny the transfer to a qualified child care center operator. And I think Mr. Huber is right. I don't think we have that authority. We need to have an amendment to the plan to reflect the fact that there's a new operator, and it's not unreasonable for us to require that we get a certification by the new operator that the new operator has read our decision and agrees to comply with it. But other than that, I believe that if the new operator has been licensed by the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care, we don't have the authority to deny it.
So you would say fine to the paragraph at the top of page 3 of his letter.
I would add the requirement that the operator be licensed by the Department of Early Education and Care.
I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, okay, that sounds like a good addition.
And I think as to 3.8 on page 2, I think we've already agreed that's okay.
What
Yeah,
conditions did we already agree is okay?
His
Larry? Nugget?
discussion on page 2 of his letter
Yeah,
concerning
we-
3.8.
yeah, we modified 3.8.
So I think we're.
Yes.
That's fine, and his proposal as to 3.19 is fine. So we're really, what we're left with is the initial.
Can I just go back to 318? So we're basically, we're leaving the section in that indicates that the initial operator is NCC, and then getting rid of the rest and writing a condition that is consistent with what's articulated at the beginning, at the top of page 3 and in Hubert's letter, correct?
Which I
Yeah.
think is already in our decision draft, isn't it? I think that that kind of language is already there.
No, he recites in 319 our language, which requires prior written approval.
So
And
that,
the proposed language does not require our prior written approval. It requires notification to us. Right? Isn't that
Okay,
what you
let's-
said was okay, Paul?
Well, let's take a look at 3.18 because the current language of 3.18 is kind of different than what's represented.
Initial
Oh,
operator,
in Huber's letter, he references 3.19.
I know, but it's now 3.18.
Oh, it's a
And-
mistake.
and
Okay.
it reads, the initial operator of the childcare facility at 1688 Central Ave shall be the NCC. The petitioner shall provide a copy of the lease agreement between the petitioner and the NCC, which confirms its operational agreement, the operation of the childcare facility at 1688 Central Ave by NCC
Take out 858 Great Plain Avenue.
may
That comes
not be
out.
transferred, set over, or assigned by the petitioner to any other person or entity without such person or entity certifying they have read and understood this decision and agreeing to maintain compliance with all aspects of this decision and without the
Period.
prior.
What's that, Paul?
Period. After the word, well, after the word decision, actually, and that they are licensed by the Massachusetts. And let me look at this to see whether it's department or division. I called it up. Department of Early Education and Care.
I'm fine with that. Do we want to keep in the notwithstanding provision? That it may be transferred to an affiliated entity under.
Their benefit. Yeah.
The person, should we say the person or entity rather than they?
No, such person.
Well, I guess we use they when it says they have read and understood this decision. Okay, and they, all right, we'll leave they. And they have been licensed by
Right.
whatever the agency is. Okay.
So we have to take out the language that starts with the word and without the written approval of the board following such notice and hearing, if any, as the board in its sole and exclusive discretion shall deem due and sufficient. I think that language should come out.
Agreed.
Fine.
Yes, we do still need an and though, because wouldn't it be and that they have been licensed?
Sure.
okay.
So let me just summarize so far. As to 2.1D, we've deferred. As to 3.8, we've adopted his proposed change. As to 3.19, we've essentially adopted his proposed change. And as to the last 3 provisions that he says the decision would need to be modified to include, we've said no. So what's left is a discussion of the deferred material and 1.16, 1.16A, 1.16C, and 315 and 316
317.
and 317.
So
Can I go back for 1 sec to 3.18? Are we deleting the sentence that begins notwithstanding the above? Because it,
No.
we're keeping that in.
because it refers to, all right, without board approval or action. So with the case, in the case of an affiliated entity, all we need to be provided with is a copy of the name and address of the entity.
Right.
Yeah, I
Marty,
mean,
you look,
all right. But, you know, I was just wondering if it's confusing to refer to approval or action, that's all.
So do you want to go back to what he cites as 1.16A and C on page 3?
Yeah,
Which, by the way, are now 1.17A and 1.17C.
Let's take them separately if we may. 1.16A, I am still not willing to give up the planning board making the decision, not the police chief.
I agree with that. I've always been very cautious and concerned about this provision and making sure that we do have this post-occupancy traffic study. And I really think we need to evaluate it. Yeah.
Well, let's get to the issue of the traffic study.
well, just
Because I
on
thought
the,
about that for a second. Well, you want to finish up on 1.16A?
where we have 30 days and he's, or where we have 60 days and he's proposing 30 days. I think 6 weeks after the start of the school year is reasonable to determine the regular flow of traffic resulting from this. So I would move the 60 days down to 45 days.
Well, isn't this one thing that he already agreed to? Didn't
I
he?
don't know that he did.
Sorry?
I don't know that he did.
Okay.
I'll be honest, Marty, I think that there is a number of things that he had agreed to and then said that he wouldn't agree to anymore if certain other conditions were not met.
Well, okay.
It's
But
a
do you think
blurred
this is
line.
one of the things he agreed to, the 60 days? Originally?
Initially, I believe.
The 60 days means it will remain in place for a minimum of 60 days. During that time period, the petitioner can request that it be discontinued at the 60-day period. And we then would make a finding. Right? That's the way it's worded now. So it seems like 60 days to have a period of time that it's been in operation, and then they file their request, and we have a hearing, if we want a hearing. It seems as though you really need 60 days.
Based on what, Gene?
But based on just the process of, I mean, unless they file their request on day one.
Gene, it's not about the filing date. The question is, what happens to the traffic between the 6th week and the 8th week that's going to be different?
Well, there is sort of a question. I mean, there's nothing in the way we phrased it that would keep them from coming in after 30 days and saying, we would like the planning board to tell the police department to stop the detail after 60 days. There's nothing in there that would stop them from doing that.
Oh, that's right. And that's what I was envisioning. And it certainly takes a certain amount of time for us to evaluate that and make a decision. And we certainly want to keep the police detail going while we're going through that process. That was what I
But the
thought.
process doesn't have to start after the 60 days. And I
No.
agree. with you. I agree.
Okay. I think the question of 45 days to 60 days, given all of the other issues that we've discussed and we've
It's a minor
agreed to,
thing.
is a very minor matter.
I agree.
If
How about 2
everybody
weeks?
thinks 45 days is enough, and they can come in during that time to request that it end at 45 days,
I'd go along with that.
I think it'll work.
So am I changing that language or not?
Oh, it sounds like people are going in the direction of making it 45 days instead of 60, but.
Just change 60 to 45.
Yeah. I
Okay,
don't
fine.
need- No other changes are needed, I think, there.
Okay,
Unless you want to say, nothing herein shall prohibit the petitioner from seeking a determination before the 45 days that the detail may end at 45 days, something like that.
I don't think it's necessary.
I don't think it's necessary.
I don't think it's necessary either. You'd put it in after upon request of the petitioner, comma, which request may be filed prior to the 45 days or
Sure.
after the 30th day or something.
Something
But I
like that.
don't think that we need it.
I don't know. Does it, people think we need it or just leave it alone? Adam, Paul?
I mean, I'm just inclined to change the 60 to 45 days, but
And then just leave the language as it is.
yeah.
And they can file their petition whenever they choose to file it.
Yeah, okay.
One point 16C,
Which is
Mhm.
117C now.
which is now 117C. First of all, I don't think it's vague because, they've got a traffic expert who knows how to do a traffic study. Has done multiple traffic studies on this project. I
Mhm.
think their expert, if not their expert, certainly John Diaz knows how to conduct a traffic study for this
Yeah.
project
And it-
without our setting forth specific guidelines. That's not our job. That's their profession. They know what they need to present to us.
Um,
But I'm willing to not make this mandatory if it's not necessary. If they come to us and say, look, it's been 45 days and the traffic's been flowing perfectly. And they're in front of us to get rid of the police detail. And it's a public hearing. The neighbors have an opportunity to come in and say, no, it's not flowing perfectly. But if the traffic is flowing fine, we don't need a condition that requires them to spend the money to do a traffic study. I would start it with upon the request of the planning board. The petitioner shall complete a follow-up traffic study, etc.
So that it's not mandatory.
So it's not mandatory, it's upon our request. And then upon the request of the planning board to have a peer review, the petitioner shall further fund such peer review.
And would you leave it as upon request of the planning board? No, I don't think this is going to be perceived by the applicant as very different because of course the planning board can make that request. The petitioner shall complete a follow-up traffic study after the site is open and operational to at least 80% of student capacity. And is there an end point after which we we couldn't make such a request, or does it just kind of go out indefinitely?
I think it should go out indefinitely, because if neighbors start complaining that the traffic's getting really backed up and bad,
Okay.
we should have the ability to.
The site is open
But
after
the
the
traffic
site is
study.
open and operational. Petitioner shall further fund a peer review, yes.
If requested by the planning board.
Yeah, but what it actually doesn't say, I think he points out, then what? Then what? If we discover that there's a problem, then what?
Well, then we can impose conditions that happens somewhere else. If it's
Yeah.
not, if it's not operating as they indicated it would operate, then we can ask them to do mitigation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but where do we say that?
We say that, I think, in the conditions themselves.
All right, all right, I just want to make sure that that's all the,
Okay,
Oh.
let's make, okay. In the event that the traffic or parking problems caused by the use of the property, this is 316, develop that are inconsistent with what,
wait a minute, it's where? It's in
316,
316, all right, let me find that. Okay, great. Caused by the use of property developed that are inconsistent with the board may notify this, it's very important, accordance with the provisions of section 4.2. Okay, that's all I was looking for.
okay.
I mean, we could narrow it down, I suppose, and talk about, well, what conditions exactly are we talking
We can't know
about?
what they are until we know what the traffic issues are.
Yeah,
Jim.
reducing the number of children or the hours of operation or what. Yeah, okay.
No, there are some things we can't do under
Okay.
the Dover Amendment.
We're not
limited-
talking about changing the location of the building or anything.
Well, that would cost them a lot of money. But in
Yeah.
terms of changing the number of children that are there, I think there's a case. I think I remember seeing a case that says that under the Dover Amendment, we can't tell the
Okay.
child care
but-
facility
so-
how many
so-
children
so
they
is-
may have. We have limited it to 115 children because that's what they presented in their application. And
So I
we
suppose what we're
this is what
talking
you've agreed
about,
to, So this is what we're going to have.
what we're talking about in terms of condition is having staff accompanying children and the way it was presented, the way that they managed the entry of the children, getting them out of the cars quickly. That's the kind of condition we're talking about?
It could be.
Mhm.
We won't know that until we know what the problem is.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll let it go now.
Let me ask you a question. This is on what is now 1.17C, which in his letter, Evans is calling this 1.16C. The petitioner shall complete a follow-up traffic study after the site is open and operational, blah, blah, blah. So the way that's written, a follow-up traffic study, that says to me, one time. So if we say to the petitioner, please do a traffic study after 6 months, and they do it, then can we ask them 3 years later if things have changed to do a follow-up traffic study, or can we not? I read it as no, because it's a single follow-up traffic study.
I think that's what its intent was. I mean, the intent of this was they've represented that it's going to function a certain way. And after it's operational, we want a traffic study done that demonstrates that it's consistent with what was represented and things are functioning as they were represented. That was the purpose of this.
Yeah, I agree that it's the idea is to have a reasonable period of time to make sure everything's operating the way they said. And after that, we're good.
Mhm.
And if
I mean,
they,
we're not looking at other projects, you know.
I will say that Evans does make a good point about there being some vagueness about the trip count. If they go ahead and they do and they do, a new traffic study at our request, I think we should have more specific criteria which that would require permanent detail. And the challenge is the hearing is closed and we don't know what that reasonable standard would be. If the conditions are, let's say, 15% worse than what they represented, does that merit a permanent police detail?
Well, that's what we have to decide at that time. We have to decide what the issues are and what potential mitigations are required to take care of it.
Is there a way to?
How about if we add language to traffic study, to provide a traffic study consistent with the methodology and conclusions previously presented to this board?
Previously represented
Like that.
to this board.
Well, because the traffic studies were presented to the board. We have traffic studies. They've done traffic studies. They presented the traffic studies to us. Consistent with the traffic studies presented to this board.
I don't know about conclusions.
Well, the conclusions are that there are a certain number of trips, that they're coming from the
Right.
north and south, you know. You do a traffic study and then the traffic, and then they reach certain conclusions based on that traffic study to say that the traffic should flow okay.
All right. And that gives it a sort of, what are we looking for here?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
we're looking for what they did before.
Yeah, right. That what they
So what
said.
is the language, Paul, again? I'm sorry.
Traffic study using the methodologies and presenting conclusions consistent with the traffic studies presented to the planning board in this application.
So based on, it was based on the methodologies and
Conclusions
and
consistent with the conclusion. Yeah.
presenting conclusions consistent with the traffic studies presented to the planning board in the application.
Marty, what do you think of adding that language?
Well, I'm okay with that. I'm still a little bit stuck on 1.17C, your proposal that it begin with, upon request by the planning board, the petitioner shall complete a follow-up traffic study after the site is open and operational to at least 80% of student capacity. I'm okay with what Jean says is the intent was to just require once a traffic study. But what if it were to say, upon request by the planning board by no later than, say, 18 months after it's at 80% operational capacity?
Okay.
I'm not sure when we want to ask them to do that study.
Yeah,
I think John Diaz recommended 80% of capacity. When they were operating at 80% of capacity, that's when he recommended the study be done.
It'd be done
Right.
right then and there. And now we're introducing upon request of the
well,
plan.
because my sole point is, and if you can come up with better wording than just saying upon request, my sole point is, if after the 45 days or the 60 days or however long the period of time is, they come back to us and say, traffic's flowing fine. We don't need the police detail anymore. Traffic's flowing fine. No traffic is backing up, getting in and out of the driveway. Why do we need to spend the money for a traffic study?
Yeah.
And why do we need to spend the money in addition to our traffic study to pay for a peer review?
I
And your condition makes it mandatory.
I get that. And I guess I'll go along with the John Diaz's suggestion that the study be done once we're at least 80% student capacity. But then the question is, how are we going to know that?
I would say 100%. I think I would prefer 100% capacity.
Well, how are we going to know that?
Well,
I think we should make perhaps a requirement that they inform us at that time, at that 45-day mark, at the time of their.
Well,
wait.
but maybe they're not gonna open it 100% capacity. Maybe she doesn't have the enrollment. I don't know if she's gonna hit I can't remember. If she's gonna hit her target number when she opens.
So let's
And
put
the
a requirement in here that, once a month or something, she tells us at what operational capacity is she at. And that's when we'll know, and that'll trigger the study.
I think that's reasonable.
And we could talk about whether you want it to be 80% or 90% or 100%. But I think if she's required to tell us where she is, we have a benchmark after which we trigger the study. We trigger the study and it's done once. That works for me.
That's what we could say something like, the operator shall report monthly to the planning department, the number of children served, something like that.
Yeah.
The number of
And
enrolled.
then upon request of the planning board, petitioner, just say, yeah, something like that.
So what do people think about 100% versus 80% or somewhere in between?
Maybe
Well,
some-
if our traffic peer reviewer suggested 80%, it's a more conservative time in which to study the impact than waiting for 100%, I suppose.
How's it
well-
more conservative?
Yeah, though I suppose it could work two ways. If it's only at 80%, then it's going to show that the traffic impact isn't that bad.
Exactly.
But maybe they'll never, even during that year, we're talking about having this ability to ask for it. Maybe they never will achieve 100%.
In the meantime, the
Why
neighbors
would
are
we,
complaining that the traffic is bad.
One at a
Again?
time.
Well, I didn't hear. I'm sorry. Could you
I
repeat
said,
it?
why would we second guess our peer reviewer, who's a traffic professional, who has recommended this is the appropriate standard?
Mhm.
Because I think there are some unknowns with this operator and with, and how they've represented themselves.
Yeah, but Adam, she may never get to 115 students. And then she says, well, I don't have to do, then they say, well, we don't have to do the traffic study because we're not at 115 students.
Exactly.
You
Right.
require us to do it when we reach 115 students. We're not there, we're not there, we're not there.
Mhm.
So
In the
then it
meantime,
goes
she's trying to
back.
make money, so she's trying to get enrollment.
So then do we do it by time or do we do it both?
No,
Maybe-
I agree with Lee. If John Diaz says a good time to have a second look here is when they're at 80%, which is what, like 85 students roughly. You'll have an idea of what the traffic's doing.
And the idea is we won't ask for another one a year later. I mean, is there some way we could make it clear, without setting a time limit on us, that we have to make the request within a certain period of time? I mean, we're not saying we will do this over and over again.
Well, let's look at this practically.
Yeah.
If 2 years goes by and traffic gets bad and the
Mhm.
neighbors can't get out of their driveways, can't get to work, they're sitting in their driveways for 20 minutes before they can get out of their driveways and get to work, we're going to hear about it and we're going to have to do something about it.
Mhm.
Marty won't hear about it. He won't be here. But the rest of us will have to deal with it. And so,
And
Like-
condition,
like everything, we get complaints from the neighborhood. We call in the operator and say, we have these complaints. What are we going to do about it?
and section 3.16 lets you do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
But just as a point of information, 80% of 115 is 92.
Thank you.
mhm.
I think that's fine.
Mhm.
If she's got an enrollment of 92 students, we'll know if the traffic is bad.
So are we saying that the only changes we'll make to C are upon request of the planning board, the petitioner shall complete a follow-up, it just is worded here, after the site is open and operational, and then shall
Oh,
fund, and then
wait a minute.
the board finds that based on the methodologies and presenting conclusions consistent with the traffic studies presented to the planning board in the application, the foregoing elements of the plan. That's what we're talking about? I'm trying to read.
Yeah. How about if instead of at the request of the planning board, we leave it mandatory, but we give an out to say upon request of the petitioner, the planning board, after notice and hearing, may determine that the traffic study is not necessary. Trying to
Yeah.
give an out if we find that the traffic isn't a problem and they don't need to spend the money to do it.
That would be like adding a new sentence upon.
Yeah.
And should we pre-establish what a problem is regarded as? Because it's one thing for an engineer to say statistically, but it's another thing for neighbors to be stuck in their driveways and on Carlton and Country Way.
This is just the preliminary. Do they do the traffic study or do they not do the traffic study? If they come to us and say, we don't think we need to do the traffic study, I'm sorry, I got a flash of a text message from somebody on my screen, so that diverted my attention for a second. Where was
Even
I?
though we're at 80%.
So we get the petitioner coming to us and saying we're at 80%, but we feel that the traffic is flowing smoothly. We shouldn't have to spend the money for the traffic study. We give the neighbors the opportunity to say, no, the traffic is bad. We can't get out of our driveways during rush hour. And, here are our videos. And the petitioner comes in with his videos. We then make a determination to say, sorry, you got to pay for the traffic study. Or we say, or it's possible that the neighbors come and say, the traffic's fine. We're not having a problem with the traffic so far.
Or the police, who's there every day.
Who could be a witness.
Some kind.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that idea.
I mean, that may wind up being the solution. The police detail comes to us and says, as long as we're there, we're able to keep the traffic flowing. If the police detail continues to keep the traffic flowing, and the operator is willing to continue to pay for the police detail, we don't need a traffic study.
Mhm.
Facts and circumstances at the time.
Yeah. So is it clear to Lee what the new sentence that would start with upon request by the petitioner?
I like what she said before. She'll listen to the tape.
What's
Yes,
that?
I understand what I'm supposed to do.
Okay.
If I have to listen to the tape again to put it together, I will.
At 316, should we set standards or limitations on we modify this decision by imposing additional conditions in accordance with the provisions of section 4.2? What's the extent of the conditions that we can
An
impose?
event, and that verse had may modify the decision by importing additional conditions in accordance with the provisions of section 4.2 is the process, right?
Yeah.
4.2 is the process. I don't think you know what conditions you're going to impose until you know what the problem is.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah, 4.2 is just saying that we're retaining jurisdiction to modify or amend the conditions and to take other action necessary to determine and ensure compliance with this decision.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Evan's point is that that's the way it's set out is vague.
It's the way
That's-
we've done it. It's the way we've done it for however many years Lee has been our planning director.
I mean, we've had this kind of condition in a lot of different permits, which is to basically say, you told us it was going to function like this. We accepted your representation, you know, and if we discovered that your representation wasn't accurate, we'll relook at it.
But realistically, guys, if it's off by one car, that's
That's not what this-
negligible.
That's not
Yeah.
what this is getting at. This is getting at, there's a problem out there and people come back to you and say, solve the
So
problem.
what shall we please determine what's regarded as a problem?
We can't determine that today, Adam. They haven't even built the childcare center. We don't know what the traffic issues are going to be like 6 months, 3 months, 6
I
months, 60
recognize
days
that.
after they build the childcare center.
I understand that. But there are certain we can set the ballpark. We can
No,
also-
that's not our job today, Adam. Our job today is to get a decision that has to be filed by March 7th.
I
And then if
Paul,
Evans wants to appeal it.
I
he appeals it.
understand what our role is today. There may be limitations on what's practical or applicable by law. What we, even if the traffic was worse, was 50 to 80% worse than what it is today in those hours, directly as a result of this daycare. What is the maximum condition we could impose?
I don't know, because I don't know what the issues are going to be as to what the effect of that worse is. Is it because the traffic coming from the north is worse, but the traffic from the south isn't?
Is irrelevant.
Is it vice versa? No, it's not irrelevant, because we want to impose conditions to mitigate the problem. And we can't impose conditions to mitigate the problem until we know what the problem is. And we can't even conceive today.
Paul,
of what
whether
the
it's
problems
north or
might be.
south, it's irrelevant. What's relevant is whether you've got a permanent police detail, you have to widen the road, you have to, and create a left turn lane.
Yeah, we can't determine that today. We can't know that until we see what the traffic is.
Maybe they actually end up needing more parking than they provided.
Yeah, maybe that's the
traffic
solution.
is
That they have more
backing up to the
parking, that they have a
road,
bigger
which is-
parking lot.
Yeah,
I don't have a crystal ball, Adam.
Clearly, none of us do, Paul. I'm just trying to avoid a scenario where a provision is perhaps struck down because it is in itself too vague. So
I'm willing to
trying-
gamble that because I think this is the best we can do.
Okay. Okay, I don't want to spend any more time on that issue then. Is there?
I think we've now talked about everything in the letter except what we deferred.
Which is the question, I guess, of the setback.
Correct.
yeah.
We're-
Well, I mean, given the way the letter was written, I think we've already said no to enough that it seems pretty clear that, we
Oh,
can't
deal.
say yes to his letter. So,
Leave it at 135 feet.
well,
My concern is that such a decision, setting a 135-foot setback will be appealed and that we will not prevail on that. On the other hand, if we go along with the 80 feet, even if the applicant still has objections to other of our conditions, if they appeal, we stand a chance of prevailing.
I
Why?
disagree. I
I
disagree.
worry about the
If I-
setback.
If I'm Evans Huber, and I'm going to appeal all these things that we have not given him today, I'm in front of the judge at 64 feet. I'm not in front of the judge at 80 feet. And
Correct.
we go and say, but he agreed to 80 feet. No, he didn't agree to 80 feet. 80 feet was a settlement offer. He's still legally at 64 feet. That's what's on the plan. And, you know, we're arguing to the judge, we're arguing, Evans is arguing as to what the appropriate setback is. And there are legal issues involved. As to, I mean, the judge could very well determine, and I hate to say this in public record, but I'm going to say it. The judge could determine that according to our bylaw, the legal limit is 35 feet.
What worries me.
Well, he could be, you know, that's a legal argument. I think there is a case that I've read, was not a Dover Amendment case, but it was a site plan decision case that said, no, we're not limited to 35 feet. We can find under our site plan decision requirements, you know, the nature of the neighborhood and all that, that the setback should be more than 35 feet. We can make that determination.
And
Now,
the
does that
burden
apply
of
to the
proof,
Dover Amendment or not? You know, Evans has the argument that that doesn't apply to the Dover Amendment. We have the argument that it does.
and the burden of proof will be on us.
No, the burden of proof is on Evans that our regulations are not reasonable.
Our regulation is 35 feet.
No, our regulation is our site plan decision.
Okay,
We are imposing conditions. We are imposing regulations. And according to the cases, according to the Tufts University case, the burden of proof is on the petitioner that our regulations that we're imposing are unreasonable.
Even though our regulations exceed the dimensional requirements.
I've read the case that says that under site plan review, we can impose a setback greater than the bylaw minimum requirement. It wasn't a Dover Amendment case, but it's a case.
I don't know that because this is a Dover Amendment case, when town council provided us with that spreadsheet, that he would concur with that statement. But Marty, you were going to say something?
I don't know whether, to be honest, I don't necessarily, I can't concur with the statement or not. It has to be, it's, you know, it would be a question of making new law as to whether that case is that case that I read doesn't apply in the Dover Amendment situation. That hasn't come up yet. The answer is maybe yes, maybe no. Take out a
Well,
coin and flip it.
there's no
Let me ask
reason
a
to
question.
debate this further if the three of you are content with the 135 feet. I'm certainly not going to vote against the grant of site plan approval, whether it's 135 feet or 80 feet. I just wanted the opportunity to again present that I thought a compromise was called for here. So shall we move on?
Well, let me just say for the record that I've never said that it has to be 135 feet. I've always said that I think there's some play there. I do think 64 is too close. I think 80 feet is still too close to Central Avenue. But to me, there's nothing magical about 135 versus 5 or 10 feet less. So if it's worth talking about, I'm open to talking about it. But if Paul and Adam think got to be 135 feet,
No.
then that's what it is.
No, I'm with you, Marty. 64 is too little. 80 feet is too little. I'm willing to come down from 135, but we have this letter, but 135 is the decision that we have, and we have this letter that says, unless you agree to all these other conditions that we're asking for, which we have not agreed to, we're going to appeal. They're going to appeal anything that we put in there, whether it's 135 or 125 or 110. If you're suggesting that maybe we should lower it to 125 feet, I can vote for that. I wouldn't vote for anything below 100 feet. Would I vote for 110 feet? I'm not sure.
Here's
125 feet, yeah, I can live with that. 120 feet, you're reaching my limit. 115 or 120 feet is my limit.
so I think that that's clear. Unfortunately, this is a problem of the applicant's own making. And unfortunately, it's now sits with us. If this was a more clear or a better process, we would have had this discussion at the outset of the process with the applicant and figured out where a real compromise could be made. But we don't really have that opportunity, which is unfortunate. I think that I concur with both of you that 80 feet is not enough. And I also recognize that 135 was a compromise from what I was initially looking at for keeping it in line with the Temple Aliyah 200 or 213 feet, whatever that was. But there is, I think what we're trying to establish is at what setback, given the size of this building in relation to the size and setback of the building next door, the temple, is this thing going to look so out of place? And Marty, to your point, it may be an arbitrary thing. I think that, 100 feet, I think I would not on my own want to go below 100 feet. I would be comfortable somewhere above 100 feet, but I don't think we have that option now, because what happens next? We issue our decision and either he appeals or not, right? We're not.
And the
gonna-
neighbors appeal or not.
We have the neighbors, but for sure. I mean, I almost expect them to as well, because I'm not sure that they'll be satisfied with even this decision based on some of the representations they've made to us. Now, but setting that aside, I mean, what happens now, Lee? We issue our decision and he can appeal it in 21 or 20 days, or the neighbors can. But
And then once appeals are filed, and we answer the appeals, I guess, we probably have to file an answer.
Mhm.
And we have an opportunity to start negotiating again. Then we.
only after a judge says so.
No,
No. We always, once we know that we're in front of the judge, once we know that we're in front of the court, appeal has been taken, a timely appeal has been taken. We file a timely answer so that we're not defaulted. Now we're legally in front of the court, can always have settlement discussions at that point.
which almost any judge that I've ever known would heartily encourage. Let me put it that way.
Doesn't the
Yeah.
land court even require, or sometimes require? I don't know, maybe I'm
The
wrong.
unfortunate problem,
Been a long time.
the biggest loser in this, unfortunately, is Pat Day, because she can't operate her daycare because this process will go on unending. But
That's really not our issue, unfortunately. I understand what you're saying. I do want to say one thing for the record. We got a bunch of comments in from a lot of people, and speaking for myself, I appreciate all those comments. Some I found helpful, some not so helpful. But it was good to have them. And I'm glad people wrote, and I'm glad I had a chance to read it all. One of the things that we received was this settlement letter that we've been talking about from Attorney Huber. And many of the people who wrote to us were offended in some way or another by that settlement discussion letter. And so I just want to say, and for the record, it's fine. I'm not at all offended by that letter. I think I viewed it as a good faith attempt to see if we could come to some resolution of this. And I always think that's worth discussing. So I just want people to know it in no way offended me. And I am a lawyer. I've had a long career as a lawyer, and we're used to seeing things like that. We're used to understanding that it's almost always better if you can settle it than have to deal with a litigation. So I'm always open to that. I just wanted to be clear about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I echo your comments. I think that this has been an extraordinary process. Extremely
So,
complicated.
Lee, should we have a
A vote?
motion today to approve the decision as drafted with the modifications discussed and agreed to today? Or do you want us to wait until March 1st to have a new draft decision in front of us to have that motion?
Lee, you're muted.
Let me just ask one question. Were you going to discuss Pat Day's comments too? Are we done?
I thought we discussed them. What other comments did she have that we didn't discuss?
The dumpster, are we changing the hours for the dumpster pickup?
No.
I guess we talked about that, and we talked, okay, I guess we did talk about her issues, and we decided then to leave the 135 alone. Is that the decision?
I think so.
I'd be open to changing it. Like, I think.
What do you want
Paul
to
and
change it
Marty
to,
are.
Adam?
What's that?
What do you want to change it to? 125?
I would change it to 110 or 115.
I'm not willing to go that low. Not if we already, based on the tenor of Evans's letter, I think he's going to appeal anyway, even at 110 or 100, even at 110 or 120. He's saying he's going to appeal anyway. And I think that the comments that we got from the neighbors saying to us, don't give in to the blackmail of his letter, which I don't think we have. We haven't, but I think we should leave it at 135 because that's a decision that we reached going into this discussion, and in terms based on the comments from the neighbors and from counsel for one of the neighbors, where we haven't acceded to Mr. Huber's other demands. So we're going to be in front of the judge anyway. I don't want to be accused of caving to Mr. Huber on that issue where we really don't need to. I'm comfortable at 135. I'd kind of be comfortable at 125, but I don't see why we need to go there.
Well,
Okay,
since-
well then in that
Marty?
case,
No, I want to hear from the other board members.
oh,
I
I'm
would-
sorry.
I would just say that, since this decision is going to require 4 votes and you're not willing to go beneath 135, then that's.
No, I'm willing to go below 135 if the three of you think we should. I just gave my opinion on it. I want to reach consensus. I want to have a vote. I definitely will not go below 120. If I'm going to be in the 120s, I'd rather be at 125.
Well, you've already heard Jean say that she'd be comfortable at a lot less. You've heard me say that nothing magical about 135. I'd certainly go to 120, which is your bottom line. And I think I hear Adam saying, If 120 is where you'll go, then he's okay with that. I don't want to speak for people, but I think that's what I've heard.
That's correct.
So am I hearing 3 people at 120?
I think so.
Adam,
Yes.
Jean?
Well, it's certainly going in the right direction. So.
All right, then
yes.
I'll agree with the 120. We have, we have consensus. We need 4 votes. Let's change 135 to 120. And then the 280 gets reduced by 15. So
To
the 280 gets
265.
reduced down to 265.
Right.
I do.
Okay, well, with that, if the board wants to vote the
Oh.
relief,
Well, can
Not
I,
there quite.
before we get to that,
Marty, go ahead.
let me just back up. Lee, on, I don't know, in January, when you sent us a draft decision to look at, you did say you covered all issues we discussed in the board's deliberations except 2 that need clarification. And the first was a condition to deal with large events was mentioned. The nature of the restriction was not decided. And number 2, there was a goal expressed that trees removed due to the relocation of the building and parking should be replaced. The specifics were not decided. We could look at a standard that requires replacement of trees over a certain caliber at a 1-to-3 ratio, for example, as a standard. Have we dealt with those 2 things?
No, we haven't.
Mm,
So let's talk about those 2.
mm.
I'm in favor of more landscaping.
Well, yeah, we haven't dealt with, if the building is to be moved back, what's going to be in front of the building? It certainly gives the opportunity for more landscaping. Unless they come back and want to put the septic there.
Yeah,
But
we
having
also have,
something
we also have
replaced-
the issue that by pushing the building back, we're pushing the playground back. And the lot narrows, as you go back, the lot narrows. And so it may be difficult, we need a tree planting. We would need a tree planting plan.
Mm,
Now we're imposing a condition that's going to require additional work, and there's nothing, it's not like this is the Conservation Commission where there is a rule about replacing trees. We don't have that rule. We don't have a tree bylaw in this town.
It's true.
I personally think it's too late in our decision-making process to be raising that issue.
Marty, what do you see as a solution?
Well, I guess I'd say more generally that I'm definitely in favor of substantial landscaping screening on this site. But how to get there and what exactly it's going to look like, I don't know.
Could we set the standard, such as Marty mentioned, of replacement of trees over a certain caliber, and leave the location and type of trees up to our tree warden? If that's the right title. He's very good.
Yes. I'm fine with that.
Lee, do you have any reaction to that?
I'm just trying to think how to do it, how we probably would do it it would be like a plan modification that they'd have to
Yeah.
provide a landscape plan.
Yes, it would be a plan modification. We would require them to replace trees that are, we can't even deal with the trees that have already been taken down. We don't even know how many there were.
Mhm. But that's a reason to have this rule, because so many were taken down, and now more will be taken down.
So what are we proposing? How many trees will be replaced for each tree taken down? Or one tree for how many taken down? What's the,
Did you have wording, Marty? Is there something?
No, no, I don't have wording to offer.
Lee,
There are-
is there anything we've done in the past for something like this?
No, nothing's coming to mind. Do you want me to make all the changes we agreed on today? And between now and our meeting on Tuesday, have a conversation with Ed Olson and come back with a suggestion. Let me give it some thought about how we would address it in a plan modification. Do you want to do it that way?
Sure,
I like that idea, yeah.
okay.
And what
So
about the
we'll-
other thing regarding large events? Have we
Well,
dealt,
that's,
we
well,
may
I
have
think-
dealt with that enough. I think we said, there can't be any off-street on-street parking.
Right.
Didn't we
So-
talk about that?
well, we didn't allow for it. I mean, we basically allowed, I think, we basically allowed her to have, when we talked about, I think we talked about what functions could happen there, that they could have the administrative meetings outside, that you had the function of the daycare center with it between certain hours, and then you allow them to meet with parents.
What's the meet with parents that I thought it could include, we didn't set a limit on the size of the group of parents.
No, we
Well,
didn't.
Isn't that who they'd be meeting with? Or
It
having
would
an
be-
event with?
That's limited. I mean, the thing that I wanted to avoid is if they, for instance, had a concert at 4 PM, and then all the parking is, a problem. If they wanted to do a fundraiser, if they wanted to do other kinds of events, and they've run out of parking on site. I thought that she said in the very beginning, or at some point in the early process, that no, we'll have these events at our other site, and we've done that before. Or they'll have them on at a different property that they don't operate out of.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's been brought to us. I don't think she's brought that to us and asked us to
As to what?
allow her to have large events like that.
Well, it's not that she's asked us to have large events, but I think the story has changed and that that they want unfettered access to the building at different times to be able to hold different kinds of activities.
I mean, I think what we ended up doing was we changed that one section 3.3, which spoke to the hours of operation for the childcare facility. And then we went on to say that the facility could be used, on weekday evenings and on weekends for meetings with the parents and for administrative meetings with her staff
Only.
only.
Could we change it to say meetings and events?
No, I don't
No, we
want to.
didn't.
I don't want
The
to.
families,
Let them-
the parents,
Let them, we're getting too far along. We have to have this decision by March 1st. And this is a new issue that, the neighbors, if I were a neighbor, I would be upset that at this late hour, we're going to allow them to have 100 cars going onto
Right.
that property.
We never will.
Okay.
No,
What?
we're never allowing that. There's
Well,
no way
no,
under
no,
the.
no, that's how it's going to be perceived. That's how it's going to be perceived.
Well,
You're going to have,
Union
you're
has
going to have
drafted
parents, you're going to have
never allow
large
that.
events for parents of 115 kids. Okay, it's going to generate more traffic. It's going to generate noise if they have an outdoor event. Let them come back to us in a few months with an amendment, with a carefully drafted amendment to the decision if they want to cover large events, and we can consider it. But, I need to know more than just saying, allow us to have large events. That's too amorphous for me.
Oh, no,
I-
I don't want it either.
I was only thinking of events that include the families, not others.
Yeah, families for 115 kids.
All right, all right.
And there are scenarios, Gene, where, my wife and I are coming from two different directions and we're meeting at Jeffrey's school. So that's 2 cars on site for 1 kid.
All right, leave that one alone. I don't,
Okay, then then I'll incorporate all the changes you have talked about today. And give you a red line that you'll have on Tuesday. And I'll see if I can't come up with a strategy to deal with the landscaping issue.
Okay.
And then on,
We
and then on-
don't take any vote today.
No, we'll take the vote on Tuesday
Okay,
because we don't have a decision. There are some things that are still open
okay.
so we'll vote the decision and the relief on Tuesday, yeah?
on Tuesday.
Right, and I did put a placeholder on the agenda because I was afraid this was going to happen.
Well, shall I make a motion to adjourn, or are there other
Well,
items?
no, give the chair back to me.
I am
okay.
now returning the
Okay.
chair.
Thank you. So let me find my agenda. Because there are other agenda items. Okay, so minutes, there were no minutes in our packet for today. Correspondence, going a little bit out of order. There was no additional correspondence in our packet today. Report from planning director. Anything to report?
I have nothing new to report.
Okay, anything from
Move
board
to
members?
adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Oh, moved.
No, you're
Second.
seconding, Marty. Well,
All right, I'm seconding it.
I'll call the roll. Adam Block,
Aye.
Marty Jacobs,
Aye.
Gene McKnight,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. We are adjourned.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. You too.